A child's scream can pierce through the loudest city, but this one was different. It was desperate. It was raw. It was the kind of sound that makes your heart freeze. In that dark Seattle alley, a little girl begged for mercy, and the world seemed ready to fail her. But then from the shadows, a man appeared. Not a hero in shining armor, but a broken millionaire who had everything except love. What he chose to do in that moment would change both of their lives forever. This is not just a story about wealth or power. It's about courage, about standing between innocence and cruelty, and about finding family in the most unexpected places. Stay with us, because once you hear what happened next, you'll believe in second chances. Subscribe now to Hidden Echo Stories and never miss a tale that touches your soul. A scream split the late afternoon air, so sharp and trembling that it seemed to slice through the drizzle falling over Seattle. It was not the ordinary cry of a child. It was a plea stripped of hope, raw and desperate. "Please stop. I cannot take it anymore." The words echoed against the damp brick walls of an alley, swallowed by shadows that reeked of stale liquor and loneliness. Ryan Mitchell had been walking without purpose, his polished shoes tapping on the wet pavement as though mocking his restless mind. The skyscraper with his name carved into glass stood far behind him now, but he carried the weight of it still. Every meeting, every victory, every hollow triumph. He wore his success like armor, but tonight that armor felt unbearably heavy. He paused near a dumpster, staring blankly at a crushed carton tumbling in the wind, when he heard the sound again. It came softer this time, the kind of voice that belongs to someone too small to fight back. Ryan turned before thought could argue with instinct. His pulse quickened as he stepped into the narrow alley. There she was, a child no older than 6, pressed against a wall, arms lifted in futile defense. Her shoes did not match. Her coat sagged unevenly on her tiny shoulders. In front of her stood a man, swaying on unsteady feet, the stench of whiskey floating around him like poison. His hand was raised, his face twisted with the fury of someone who had already surrendered to the darkness inside him. Ryan's body moved before reason arrived. He did not shout grand words. He did not lunge with reckless violence. He simply stepped forward, his voice low, his stance unyielding. "That is enough." The man spun around, startled, eyes glassy, teeth bared like a cornered animal. For a breathless second it seemed violence would win, but then he faltered. Something in Ryan's gaze, steel, unshaken, made him step back, muttering curses as he stumbled into the rain. The alley grew quiet again, except for the sound of a child's ragged breathing. Ryan's heart hammered in his chest, harder than any business negotiation had ever managed. He turned to her. The girl did not cry. She stood frozen, trembling, blood at the corner of her lip, her eyes wide but not surprised. That was what tore at him the most. This was not new to her. She had lived inside fear long before this night. Ryan crouched slowly, careful not to frighten her further. He removed his coat and held it open. "You are safe now," he whispered. At first she did not move. But then one cautious step, then another, and she disappeared into the warmth of his coat as though vanishing into fog. She pressed her face against his side, silent, clinging as if letting go would return her to the nightmare. In that fragile moment, Ryan felt the weight of her, lighter than any burden he had ever carried, and yet somehow heavier than everything his empire had placed on his shoulders. He realized with sudden clarity he could not walk away, not from her, not from this. He guided her gently out of the alley, the city's noise returning like a dull hum around them. The Rosewood Cafe glowed faintly through its fogged windows, a small refuge from the storm. Inside, no one asked questions. They slid into a booth, steam from nearby mugs filling the silence between them. A waitress brought cocoa with extra marshmallows, but the girl's hands shook so violently the cup slipped, spilling across the table. She froze instantly, eyes widening with dread, her lips trembling. "I am sorry," she whispered, as if punishment was inevitable. Ryan said nothing cruel. He simply cleaned the spill with patient hands and offered her another napkin. "It is only cocoa," he said softly. Her eyes flickered up at him, confused by kindness as though it were a language she had never been taught. When she murmured, "He said I ruin everything," Ryan's chest tightened. He did not need her to say who he was. The storm outside thickened, streaking the glass with silver tears. She traced patterns in the condensation, her silence more haunting than words. He wanted to call someone to summon help, but the thought of her being returned to that man stopped him cold. People had looked away too many times already. He could not. When he offered to take her with him, she hesitated only a moment before nodding faintly. His coat dwarfed her frame as they stepped back into the night, her small hand slipping into his. She whispered, "I will not be a problem." Ryan knelt to her level, the streetlight catching the rain in her tangled hair. "That is not what I am worried about," he replied gently. And for the first time that night, she allowed herself to believe him. By the time they reached his car, Ryan no longer thought about meetings missed or calls unanswered. He only thought about the girl beside him, carrying scars no child should bear. He started the engine, heat filling the space between them, and as she curled against the seat, silent but no longer alone, Ryan Mitchell knew with absolute certainty. His life had changed forever. The Rosewood Cafe emptied slowly as twilight deepened. Ryan guided the girl inside, her small figure still hidden within his coat as if she might vanish without it. They found a booth in the corner, a world away from curious eyes. A waitress brought hot cocoa, but the child's trembling hands betrayed the terror that still clung to her. When the mug slipped and spilled across the table, her whispered apology carried a weight that silenced the room inside Ryan's chest. "Please do not be mad. I did not mean to." He cleaned the mess gently, his movements steady, his voice softer than she expected. "It is just cocoa, nothing more." She looked at him then, her gaze fleeting, uncertain, as if she had never been met with calm after mistakes. She spoke barely above a breath. "He always says I ruin everything." Ryan did not ask who she meant. He already knew. The drizzle outside thickened into rain, blurring the city into a wash of silver lines. The girl drew circles on the fogged window with one finger, her stillness fragile, like glass waiting to break. He wanted to call someone to summon help. But the fear that she might be returned to the same man froze him. Too many had looked away already. He could not be another. He rose and offered his hand. She startled, clutching the edge of the seat. "Where?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "My car," he answered gently. "You will not have to go back." She lowered her eyes. "I do not have a coat." He lifted the one she had clung to earlier and wrapped it around her again. It swallowed her completely, but when she pressed into its folds, it seemed to give her a safety the world had denied. Outside, the cold struck them like a warning. Her hand slid into his, hesitant, and for a second he thought she might pull away. Instead, she held on. When they reached his car, sleek and black under the streetlight, she paused at the door. "I will not be a problem," she said, as if the words had been rehearsed too many times. Ryan crouched to meet her eyes. "That is not what I am worried about," he told her. The confusion that crossed her face lingered as she climbed into the seat. He drove through the rain, her silence pressing heavier than the storm outside. She stared through the window as if searching for an escape in the blur of city lights. By the time they arrived at the urgent care center, Ryan's decision was already made. He would not leave her to fate. Not again. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. A receptionist pushed a clipboard toward him, but Ryan's voice was firm. "She has been hurt. She needs to be seen now." Minutes later, a nurse led them into a small exam room. Under the harsh overhead light, the girl, Emma, as Ryan learned, sat perched on the table, clutching a frayed stuffed penguin pulled from her backpack. Its seams were loose, one eye nearly gone, but she held it as though it anchored her to the earth. Maya Thompson entered in navy scrubs, her manner calm but attentive. She spoke to Emma in a voice that held no pity, only care. "Can I take a look at you?" Emma did not answer, but when Maya touched her hand, she did not pull away either. Slowly, patiently, Maya examined her. Faint bruises mapped her small body, some fatting, some fresh. A cracked rib, not life-threatening but painful. A hand-shaped mark on her arm, recent and raw. Emma did not cry. She accepted the examination with a silence that spoke of routine, not surprise. Ryan sat in the corner, fists clenched, jaw tight. Numbers and contracts had never made him feel powerless, but this did. Maya gave Emma a sticker shaped like a penguin, And for the first time that night, Ryan saw the child's lips twitch with the shadow of something almost like relief. When Maya pulled him aside, her voice lowered but steady. "Have you contacted CPS?" Ryan shook his head. "I did not want her left alone with anyone else, not again." She studied him, then nodded. "You did the right thing, but we need procedure. It may take a day, maybe more. They will want to investigate to verify. It is complicated, especially since you are not family." Ryan's expression hardened. "I am not letting her go back to him." "There is an option," Maya said. "Emergency foster placement. Temporary, but she would stay with you until a long-term plan is arranged." The weight of it sank into him. He had never imagined himself as a father, never prepared, never considered it. His life was skyscrapers and boardrooms, not bedtime stories and cocoa. Yet when he looked at Emma, sitting quietly on a bench, clutching her penguin with the new sticker like it was armor, he realized he had already chosen. He walked over and crouched beside her. "Would you like to come with me for a while?" She did not answer, but her hand reached for his. That was enough. That night Ryan stood outside the guest room of his penthouse, arms folded, watching Emma sleep in a borrowed shirt, her penguin tucked beneath her chin. The glittering skyline stretched beyond the windows, but inside the room everything was hushed, fragile, real. He had not checked his phone, had not returned a single call. He had only watched her breathing steady, safe at last. For years, Ryan Mitchell had been a man who had everything except purpose. But as he whispered into the silence, "What am I doing?" he felt something stir inside him, something he had not felt in years. He did not feel alone. The rain never seemed to leave Seattle. It streaked down Ryan's tall windows, painting the city in gray shadows, yet the sound of it had become a kind of background music. Inside his penthouse, Emma hummed softly beneath a blanket fort, crayons scattered at her side, her patched penguin keeping guard. The quiet moments were starting to feel like home. Laughter had begun to echo through halls that once held only silence, and Ryan found himself memorizing every sound she made. But darkness has a way of returning. It began as a flicker of fear in Emma's eyes one evening when she froze at the window. A figure stood across the street, shrouded in the dull glow of a street lamp. Ryan pulled the curtains quickly, but Emma whispered. He was watching. Ryan stepped outside into the cold, scanning the empty street, but the man was gone. Still, the dread lingered like smoke. The next morning, the evidence arrived in a crueler form. A stuffed penguin torn open, soaked by the rain, left at his front door. Not Emma's beloved companion, but an imitation. It seemed slashed deliberately, one button eye cut away. When Ryan held it in his hands, he felt his stomach tighten. Emma saw it too. She did not scream. She simply trembled, her hands shaking as though fear had been reawakened inside her bones. Ryan knew then that hesitation was over. He called his lawyer, his voice steady but resolute. "We file for emergency guardianship today. I do not care what it takes." His lawyer warned of the battle ahead, hearings, testimonies, public exposure. Ryan's reply was clear. "No more shadows. She is not going back." The weeks that followed blurred into legal forms, tense meetings, and long nights. Yet within the storm, small moments of life continued. Emma giggled at his failed attempts at grilled cheese until he finally learned to get it right. She began to call him Daddy Ryan when she was tired, her voice shy but warm. And every night, when he tucked her in beneath the constellation blanket, she held his hand as if afraid it might vanish in the dark. The confrontation came violently. Daniel found a way into the building one night, pounding on Ryan's door, shouting, demanding his daughter. His fists rattled the steel door as Emma curled in terror behind the kitchen island. Ryan pressed the intercom, his voice like ice. "You lost your chance the day you made her fear her own shadow." Blue and red lights finally cut through the storm. Police dragged Daniel away in handcuffs, his curses fatting down the hallway. Emma clung to Ryan, whispering, "Please do not let him take me." Ryan pulled her close, promising with unshakable certainty, "He never will." The courtroom was colder than any rainstorm. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, and silence weighed heavily across polished wood and rigid benches. Ryan stood tall in a charcoal suit, his pulse heavy but his voice calm. He told the judge about the night he found Emma, about the bruises, about the way she apologized for every breath she took. He described how she looked at the world not with wonder, but with fear. When Emma was called forward, the room held its breath. She carried her penguin stitched and whole again and a drawing she had made that morning. In simple crayons she showed three figures, herself, Ryan, and Maya, beneath a shining sun. "My family now," the words read. Her voice was small but steady. "I like it there. I sleep better." The judge studied her with quiet compassion before delivering the verdict. Ryan Mitchell was granted full guardianship of Emma Sullivan. Daniel's parental rights were revoked permanently. The sound of the gavel was final, sharp, and freeing. Emma turned to Ryan as they left the courtroom, her small hand tugging his sleeve. "Can I still call you Daddy?" He bent down, eyes meeting hers, voice trembling with something stronger than pride. "You always could." She threw her arms around his neck, holding on as if she would never let go. Life began again, not with grandeur but with the ordinary magic of family. Emma's room filled with painted stars that glowed in the dark, music boxes that played crooked lullabies, and laughter that bounced off every wall. Ryan learned to cut strawberries into heart shapes, to sit quietly while she drew pictures of penguins and suns, and to find peace not in silence but in the sound of her giggles. Maya visited often, her presence grounding them both, her quiet conversations with Ryan carrying unspoken meaning. One evening, as thunder rumbled, Emma turned off the hallway light and grabbed Ryan's hand. "So we can turn it on together," she said. He lifted her into his arms, flicked the switch, and warm light spilled into the space. She laid her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You found me in the dark, and now it is never dark anymore." Ryan held her close, his chest heavy with gratitude. He had once believed success was measured in towers of glass and steel, but now he understood it lived in small hands gripping his, in whispered goodnights, in a child's laughter filling a home that had long forgotten joy. The rain kept falling outside, but inside their world light had returned. And for the first time, Ryan Mitchell no longer felt like a man who had everything yet nothing. He felt like a father. There are moments in life that remind us the world is not always cold, that even in the darkest corners of the city, a spark of humanity can rewrite everything. Ryan Mitchell had wealth, influence, and the kind of reputation people chase for a lifetime. Yet none of it filled the hollow space in his chest. None of it gave him meaning, until the night he stepped into that alley and heard a child's desperate cry. Emma was small, fragile, and broken by a life she should never have endured. She carried scars that were not visible on the surface, wounds that came from words sharper than fists and silences louder than screams. But within her was a resilience that refused to be erased. And in Ryan, she found not just a protector, but the possibility of a home. What began as an unexpected act of courage grew into something deeper. A man who once measured success in boardroom victories discovered that true triumph lived in the sound of a little girl's laughter, in the drawings she taped proudly to the refrigerator, in the whispered words, "Good night, Daddy." Emma, who once begged for the world to stop, now found comfort in knowing she would never face it alone again. Their journey was not simple. Shadows returned, fear knocked at their door, and battles were fought in courtrooms where truth and lies collided. But love endured. Ryan chose to stand, to fight, and to give Emma more than protection. He gave her belonging. Together, they transformed silence into warmth, pain into healing, and loneliness into family. This is what Hidden Echo Stories is about. Stories that remind us that love is not bound by blood, that courage does not always roar, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths. Emma's voice, once silenced by fear, became a testament to resilience. Ryan's choice, once born of instinct, became the foundation of a new life. And maybe that is the reminder we all need. That even when the world feels dark and overwhelming, one act of kindness, One moment of bravery can change everything. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that hope is never lost and family can be found in the most unexpected places, then we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe now to Hidden Echo Stories, where every tale is crafted to stir your heart, heal your soul, and remind you that even in life's darkest echoes, there is always light waiting to be found.